Right. Okay, so are you able to follow the chat now?
Is it on there?
It seems that the mic is working properly, and we seem to be live.
Where'd it go? Well, as soon as I moved off of it, it went away.
Okay. So, I'm going to begin tonight. Let's see. Good evening. Hi, Dan. We're live at Sammy's Italian Pizza Kitchen tonight, and I have John with me who is going to be online monitoring the chat. So I hope that I'll be able to at least hear what the chat comments are as we go forward. Let me know if you cannot hear me. I have my shotgun mic, going. So the first thing I want to do is read this short piece, which obviously has a person and somebody who's looking at his persona. And the title of it is Carl Jung and Self-Education. Good evening, Bill. And so this is giving you permission to self-educate about depth psychology. It is a bit cooler. I have a long sleeve shirt on. So. Okay, so Carl Jung and self-education. And Dan says, hi, Bill. We have Dan online here and a couple of other people so far. And usually what I do is spend about the first 10 or 15 minutes with warm-up readings to let people come on. And normally we'll get quite a number over time. But anyway, Carl Jung and self-education. What was formerly a method of medical treatment now becomes a method of self-education, and with this, the horizon of our psychology is immeasurably widened. The crucial thing is no longer the medical diploma, but the human quality. This is a significant turn of events, for it places all the implements of the psychotherapeutic art that were developed in clinical practice and then refined and systematized at the service of our self-education and self-perfection, with the result that analytical psychology has burst the bonds which till then had bound it to the consulting room of the doctor. It goes beyond itself to fill the hiatus that has hitherto put Western civilization at a psychic disadvantage as compared with the civilizations of the East. We Westerners knew only how to tame and subdue the psyche. We knew nothing about its we knew nothing about its we knew nothing about its methodical development and its functions. Our civilization is still young, and young civilizations need all the arts of the animal tamer and young civilizations need all the arts of the animal tamer to make the defiant barbarian and the savage in us more or less tractable.
Isn't that the truth?
But at a higher cultural level, we must forego compulsion and turn to self-development. For this, we must have a way, a method, which, as I said, has so far been lacking. It seems to me that the findings and experiences of analytical psychology can at least provide a foundation, for as soon as psychotherapy takes the doctor himself for its subject, It transcends its medical origins and ceases to be merely a method for treating the sick. It now treats the healthy, or such as have a moral right to psychic health, whose sickness is at most the suffering that torments all of us. For this reason, analytical psychology can claim to serve the common weal more so even than the previous stages, which are each the bearer of a general truth. But between this claim and the present day and present day reality, there lies a gulf with no bridge leading across. We have yet to build that bridge stone by stone. And that is quoted from Carl Jung, Problems of Psychotherapy, page 75. And I believe that is found in volume 16 of the collected works of C.G. Jung.
When was that written?
I have no idea. If I were at home, I could pull it up, but if it's in...
Probably in the 50s.
Oh, wait a minute. I might have it in this book. Let's just see. Sorry. Problems of Modern Psychotherapy was in 1929. The Practice of Psychotherapy, which is volume 16, was published in the collected works in 1954. Right. So 1929.
Skip, how do I get to the messages?
I think that, let's just see here. Okay, here's live chat. Okay. Sign into live chat. John Bernhardt. Hi, Nancy. Welcome. Okay. Join us. Nate.
And you are, yes, okay, go ahead.
And I'm Skip. And welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Okay.
You're welcome to sit here if you want. We have a live audience, and trying to get John signed in here. Okay, so John, here, if you push down here, this is Chad is John. So just hit that, and that should bring up the so Nancy, I've been making videos of this session for the last 2.5 years.
Okay.
And so up until last February, we were not doing it live. Okay, we were doing it as just video that I was recording and then editing at home. But I had to have my ankle replaced, and so when I was stuck at home, I started to do it live online on YouTube, and which is where the channel is. There's a channel that we have, and it has about 740 videos on it right now.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, that I've put on there.
In the past 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. And so, but in sessions, this is the 98th meeting of this group. Okay.
Wow, we're pretty close to 100.
We're close to 100
Okay.
meetings.
98 meetings.
Right.
Every month.
Every week.
Every week.
We do it every
No,
week.
no, I mean live.
Oh, but
Like
live
here.
we used to do it every week.
Uh-huh.
Now I'm doing it on YouTube 3 weeks a month, and we're doing it live
Great.
once a month.
Okay.
And so you can watch the session every Monday night
Yes.
from home, and this is what many of our followers here are doing.
Okay.
Or you can come in when we are having group meetings because we like each other and we like getting together and we like Sammy's. So,
Great. So I've seen you the past 2 Mondays.
uh-huh,
So I just really literally signed up.
uh-huh.
A couple weeks ago.
Right, right. So you
Maybe I've watched 3. I
Uh-huh.
can't recall. It's 2 or 3. So.
well, there's lots there.
There's the meat is like there's.
Right. And so,
Yeah, you see this.
yeah, help yourself, yeah. And John, I gave you that wine so that I don't get too loose-tongued here.
I'll take the brunt of it.
Okay. So normally what I do is at the beginning, I do a couple of short readings to give people time to join us
Okay.
on YouTube. Now, I aim the camera at myself to allow you to remain anonymous, but anything you say will be picked up on the mic. Okay, and so unlike before, when I was making the videos offline, I could edit out personal things. But now, since we're online, anything personal you say during the meeting will be picked up and go international. And typically we've been getting 50 to 75 people online when it's live, and it's very common for the video to be seen by at least 200 people within 24 hours.
Great.
Okay.
I've seen that you made it growing rather nicely.
Right.
every month.
Yeah. Yeah. That's up to 2,350 subscribers now. And so it's very common for us to get between 150 and 200 viewers of any video I put up
Great.
within 24 hours. And are you able to see things?
I'm not getting any more chats. Skip, so just so you know.
Okay, well, I did see some chats, but when we're live here, we just hit the thing at the bottom. And just see if anything comes up.
Send a super chat.
No, not super chat, because that question money. Okay, so, yeah, hi Sean, thanks for letting me know. Just so all of you know, unfortunately, the chats disappear very quickly on the screen when we're broadcasting live from Sammy's. And so I might miss your chats. I'm hoping that John will be able to pick up on the
blank.
chats. We're not getting it. Okay, we might try to refresh that or something. So I'm hoping that John's going to be able to get the chats and report them out. Maybe you,
I'm
if you want
technologically challenged.
if you want to try to follow it online, you can. Okay, so tell us. Nancy.
So we're in October of this year, 2018.
Right.
So sometime in the month of January, I stumbled across a little 5-minute YouTube that was Jordan Peterson speaking. And I said, this is very interesting, Jordan Peterson. Let me Google his name, 11 o'clock at night. What else is he all about? So then I got very interested in his lectures online, his book online, learning more about him, listening, and how much he was referencing Carl Jung, as well as many other awesome, right? So as the months went by, and I really have learned a lot from just paying attention to Dr. Peterson. Jordan is like, I think he's a very integrated man with a lot of disciplines that he brings in the conversation. So then it was recently, all right, I read 2 of Jung's books, and I love Audible. So I'm always in the car listening to Audible. So I finished the second book of Carl Jung's, which I think was Memories, Reflections, and Dreams and Reflections.
Great Audible.
It was a wonderful book, and the reader was wonderful.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
In addition, and prior to that, I had In Search of Man in Search of a Soul. Okay, so I thought that was great. And several weeks ago, then I went and I said, "Where's a meetup for Jordan Peterson? Where's a meetup?" And all of a sudden, the meetup for you came on.
Uh-huh. Interesting.
That was it. So it was Carl Jung, and I don't know how it all segued, and so there I am.
Yep. Well, there is a
Biggest
meetup
survey.
for Jordan Peterson,
But-
but it's in
Experience.
Sacramento.
Right, exactly. So here we are. But that is like if you're trying to connect the dots, and then Carl Jung came into
You
being.
experienced a synchronicity.
I absolutely
that's a
was like, isn't that
right.
awesome? Yep.
Hello in
Yes.
Mexico. We have a visitor from
Great.
Mexico here with us tonight. Okay. So thank you, Nancy. Nancy is a first-time visitor to our live group, and we currently have 7 people online, but it's increasing. But I wanted to read a very important question that I received that was a comment on one of the earlier videos. And it's a question that relates to something, it's a caveat, a warning that we have to give everyone, especially young people. And so if you're under 45, it's definitely a caveat needed. And so this is from a subscriber, and I'm reading it by his permission, but I'm not going to identify him. He says, "Hey Skip, I've been wanting to ask this question for the longest time, but it's kind of off topic. I have this before from somewhere else, and I've heard you say multiple times to be careful with exploring Jung's work if you are young or in the first half of life. I'm 27 and have been interested in and learning from Jung for like 4 years now, after first being introduced by Jordan Peterson. I just naturally lean toward being so interested in this stuff, and the genie is out of the bottle at this point. I have an idea of the answer to this question being something to do with ego development in your younger years. An additional personal note for myself is that I do know that for me, having spent a lot of time learning and thinking about these matters, alongside a good amount of, I guess you could say, experiences, I can at times feel a good bit of disconnect between myself and my peers. I probably need to see a Jungian psychologist for my individual situation, so I will spare all the details. But if you had a simple answer, don't want to take up too much of your time, thank you again so much. Your work here is so valuable." Okay, so this was my response. Dear subscriber, you're right that the issue is having a strong enough ego. Everyone develops this at a different rate, so it is entirely possible that you are ready. The fisherman in a boat metaphor the fisherman in a boat metaphor was often used by Dr. Edward Edinger. If you think of the sea as your unconscious, the fish as ideas or consciousness, and the boat as your ego, you need a big enough boat to bring in the fish you find. As Dr. Edinger explained, if you pull up a fish that is bigger than your boat, you had better let that one go until you have a bigger boat. Dr. Edinger actually wrote an entire book on this using the metaphor of Moby Dick, and it's called Melville's Moby Dick. That's the name of the book. And it's by Dr. Edward Edinger, Edinger. If you delve a little bit into the Red Book, you can learn at least some of the things that Dr. Jung found in his unconscious. I had a parallel experience in 1993, but I had neither a big enough boat nor the benefit of being an experienced psychiatrist, but I instinctively cut that one loose for 21 years. It emerged as a novel over an 8-month period, which I put in my drawer for 21 years. Finally, I reeled it in, but not until I was ready for it and could explain it psychologically. Dr. Ann Belford Ulanoff, Emerita Professor of Psychiatry and Religion at Union Theological Seminary, says that when you go into your unconscious, the first thing you encounter is evil, so you need to be ready for it. Ultimately, it is the mature responsibility of each of us to differentiate between good and evil and decide for the good, hopefully. Of course, our prisons are filled with mostly men who followed the wrong path, although most of them didn't have the benefit of a Dr. Jung to guide them. The moral rules of religions, like the Ten Commandments, no longer contain us. As Dr. Thomas Arst said in the first essay in Jung's Red Book for Our Time, this book, Searching for Soul Under Postmodern Conditions, which you can find highlighted on the homepage of this channel, the signposts have all fallen. So each of us needs to find our own way, and that means everyone. Dr. Peterson is good for young people because he is teaching the rules, logos, but ultimately we are no longer little children, and we must find our own ways because the rules only relate to the structure of our societies and not to the fact issues of facing the experiences, problems, slings, and arrows of life. Then knowing the rules is helpful, but they won't help you in dealing with the Then knowing the rules is helpful, but they won't help you in dealing with a dispute with your wife. For that, you need wisdom, and wisdom emerges from experience, not rules. There is a place for 100% adherence to rules. Building a car or any other product are good examples. You would not want a Toyota that was built by people who wanted to put creativity into their manufacturing process, aside from the creative designers. Dr. Jung said at one point that until you are 40, you are just doing research. That is, you are learning how to be a mature human being in the physical environment in which you are born. But once you know where all the handles are, you have to get into your mature life. I cannot say whether you are precocious and ready or not. That is for you to decide, but your instinct about building a strong ego is essential. Remember that you must pass through the Job archetype cycle many times. In my view, as many as possible. Okay, the cycle is contest, defeat, lamentation, and rebirth. Dr. James Hillman, a famous Jungian analyst, once quipped, "Can't we find a defeat in here someplace?" From my point of view, he meant by that a Jungian analyst would have nothing to work with if you came to them without a defeat. But if you do have one, they will help you through the lamentation and help you be reborn into the next phase of your life. In my experience, if you do go into yourself in any depth, you will very quickly set yourself apart as unique and differentiated from your peers. That's one of the reasons why Dr. Jung called the process individuation. It is the process of finding what you are meant to be. It is a painful process, but necessary for wisdom and maturity. I ruefully refer to it as bumper cars. Dr. Jung noted that most people don't know and don't want to know. You can see them most weekend days spending their personal life essence on watching NFL football players or Major League Baseball players experience their authentic lives. Being an NBA watcher is not a thing in real life, even though at least one cable channel wants to sell you that ideal. If you are a watcher, you are living someone else's life, not your own. Okay, so that's my response to this follower. Any comments, folks? Dan says, I think the popularity of CGO's works were, oh, sorry, Dan, I lost it too quick. You're not able to follow up. Okay. All right, so we apologize to the folks outside of Sammy's because we cannot keep up with the chat. So we hope you have a amazing chat among yourselves while we're having our meeting. Okay, so any comments on either of those readings?
I think the idea of the don't catch a fish that's too big for your boat
Yes.
is a huge thing to think about. I mean, not just that it's a metaphor, but it is so many different ways we take on more than we can handle. And we think it'll be okay, but we just keep doing it.
We'll surely keep doing it.
And we surely keep doing it. So that really struck me that is that part of the person that you were quoting on that. I forgot.
I'm sorry, didn't you?
Yeah, so so a young man at 27 being so deeply involved in this is also a very cool and mature. He's not giving himself enough credit to understand what he's really saying out loud.
But as most of my regular followers know, what can happen is that complexes present themselves in dreams and visions as psychogenic entities, okay, as beings that we recognize as people or as dogs or whatever it is. It might be a talking rock in your dream, for all I know, but it could be something. But so I've had many experiences with those beings. And on one occasion, I had Mephistopheles plop down in the car seat next to me, and so this is a serious matter. And fortunately, I was well versed in Jung before that happened. But I can certainly vouch for the fact that if you kick off these archetypal ideas, then they're going to start to emerge in your life, and then you have to decide what's right and what's wrong. So,
Could you explain that last sentence a little bit more?
well, okay. Yourself, which is the central archetype in Jungian psychology, it's the deepest archetype in our psyche, and Dr. Jung called it the God image, sends us messages constantly. In fact, there's nothing that we do or say that doesn't come from that. Okay? I can't predict what I'm going to say at this table 2 minutes from now. I have no idea what I might be saying 2 minutes from now. And it all comes from a source that is not my conscious ego. It just emerges, right? And so that happens to us all the time, okay? None of us have any control over that. Everything we do comes from another place, from our unconscious reacting to our world. And so our unconscious is sending us messages all the time. I mean, I talk about my vision of the police car, and most of the followers have heard this vision, but whenever I get a vision of a police car going from right to left with the word police on the side of the car, and it just comes to me, I see it. Whenever I see that, I know there will be police activity very soon. Okay, so I don't need a radar detector. I just know. Okay, and I know because I get that vision, and within a minute or 2 minutes, I will see police activity of some sort. It's very often a speed trap. And so when I get that vision, I know I have to slow down, and sure enough, there'll be something. There'll be a speed trap, or there'll be an accident, or some other police activity beside the road, which I had not registered consciously, but registers unconsciously, and then my psyche sends vision, and so that's where how our psyche works, is presenting us with images. And so the Mephistopheles car seat, it was specifically because my daughter had told me I was going to hell 30 minutes earlier. It's a long story. There's a video about it on the channel, so I'll leave it at that. So I was upset, and I was thinking about hell, and I was thinking about, who are these fundamentalists who are teaching children to say such a thing to their parent, right? I was very upset about that. And so suddenly there's Mephistopheles seated next to me. And so I cut the Faustian bargain, which was, I said, Mephistopheles could take my immortal soul at my death on condition that none of my daughters would think that of me for the rest of my life. And he was happy, and he left. Mephistopheles, he accepted that deal. Okay, so I've been criticized on the channel now because they said, "Why'd you make such a bad deal with Mephistopheles?" And my response is, man, when you're going along at 65 miles an hour, the devil sits down next to you. You better find a good way to get out of it as quick as you can. Because you don't know what will happen. I mean, it literally can cause you to have an accident, people, I'm sure. And I'm sure that in Bible thumping congregations, when people are talking about fire and brimstone, I'm sure people must have visions of Mephistopheles or something, and that says, oh my God, then what the pastor is saying is real, I better be a good Christian. Okay, and it probably works for a lot of them. But because I knew something about Jung and psychogenic emanations, it didn't have that effect on me.
Have you had many?
Not many, but they can come up, okay? And this incident in 1993 went on for 8 months, and it basically, an entity took me over and wrote a novel through my hands and through my computer, but I took no conscious part in it, okay? It wrote the story of a woman. It's called Mako, Memoirs of a Woman. and it was it was a very powerful experience, and I had no clue what the heck it meant. And so I wrote the novel. Many people have read it, and in fact, when I was writing it, I was publishing the chapters online. And while I was writing it, 100,000 people, believe it or not, 100,000 people read all or part of it. But it didn't make me wealthy, I'll tell you that. And it didn't make me want to become a novelist. Pardon?
It made you interesting, for sure.
Well, and it gave me the feeling that artists often have, writers and painters. Bill's a painter and writer, and it made me know what the flow is that an artist experiences when they're being creative, and why they feel so cut off when they have writer's block. Now, for me, I would never have writer's block because I know how to connect into it. and it's not through drugs or liquor. It's yeah, it's difficult with a hyper-competitive mind. Yes, I didn't see who put that on, but yes, that's quite true. And so, anyway, but once you know that that can happen, I mean, the reason that happened was I'd been studying Jung for several years, let's say 6 years at that point, and I read a book called Women Who Run with the Wolves by Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes. And in that book, among other things, there's a story about women's individuation, which is called Vasilisa the Wise. And so I built my novel on that story, basically, and on her commentary about that story. And so she provided the skeleton, and I provided the meat to the story.
The entity that,
Pardon?
the entity that helped you.
Yeah, because she wouldn't have come up with that because she's American of Spanish descent who Spanish things, and my book is about the first woman prime minister of Japan. Yeah, but it was based on my experiences because I had lived in Japan for 8 years. So anyway, do you, John?
I still don't understand what you were saying about then you have a decision to make, or you have a way of making decisions.
Yeah, let me go back to that. Okay, so, well, yeah, during individuation, and once you kick off the individuation process, what happens is you recognize that there are opposites in everything, and those opposites are in you. And so then what happens is you recognize that there's this stream of information coming from your unconscious. And as Dr. Jung called it, you have to test spirits. And there are two streams. There's a good stream and an evil stream. And it's important for the mature ego to differentiate. Sean says, connecting with something ancient that wants to tell a story. Absolutely. And, there was an observation recently where Dr. Murray Stein was saying he didn't understand why Jung had to go back to all this medieval stuff and this Old Testament stuff. And the reason he did is because Dr. Jung was looking for the things that are instinctual. And in order to know anything about instinct, you have to go back 100 or 150 generations. You have to go farther and farther back in history. So he was looking at everything that we have coming out of the human psyche in the form of art or, the pyramids or whatever it was that human beings left behind. And he was saying, okay, those are indications of psychic development of the human species, and so he was trying to understand that.
Okay, so here's the hardball question.
Okay.
From Neumann. Neumann talks about this, and he said there may be a need to experience the shadow in order to make those mature decisions, which is a paradox, because that's not mature necessarily mature decision making, right? I mean, what you're talking about.
No, you gain maturity by experiencing the shadow.
Okay, so which is it? Which is the path in any given situation? So you must experience it to understand it.
You have to integrate the shadow and realize that, you recognize that as part of yourself.
But you can't do that without experience.
Well,
Yeah, you can't do that without experience. So,
but
you have to make mistakes.
But you had something. Were you doing the good and evil thing, or?
Yeah, kind of dealing with that duality. But that was the Neumann presentation I gave
Okay.
on the duality
All right. I
in
don't
Western
understand
culture.
the question then, but okay. I'm fine.
Well, you have to have the experience. Yes. Okay, we can talk about.
No, he didn't say you just have to have it. He said you may have to engage it.
Well, you certainly have to engage it.
Well, that's
And
an
if you
experience.
engage it, you're going to experience it. Right? This
It's
is
not a
what-
conceptual thing.
Yeah.
It's a life thing.
Yeah, it's a living thing, as Dr. Ulanoff said. And she should know because she's both emerita professor of psychiatry and religion.
But if you have a mature ego and you understand it in your head, that it's a shadow and it's going to cause you no good, but you haven't experienced it in life, do you really,
You
have
don't
you
have
really
a mature
individual?
ego.
Yeah, you don't have to
They're
wait
sure.
your
They're
age.
sure.
Yeah, you have to experience it.
Okay.
There's the contradiction.
And what she said is, when you go into the unconscious, the very first thing you run into is incarnate evil, is evil. Okay. And,
Sounds so absolute.
well,
I would say it's bizarre, but it has it can have that quality about it.
well, but, well, it's,
Dreams are quite bizarre. Can be quite bizarre.
dreams are quite bizarre, but they're part of you. they're messages from beyond for you.
What's your point?
Well, no, I mean, my point is that the symbols question you asked earlier, I actually covered this on a session a couple weeks ago, which is that you can't buy a book of symbols at Barnes and Noble and have it explain to you what your dreams mean. Okay, because your dreams are using images that are in your psyche, nobody else's. Okay, they're unique to you. Okay, for the most part. I mean, there are some images that are in our deep unconscious from millions of years ago, as I've observed. But most, we think in terms of images. Okay, first of all, we think in terms of images, and an image doesn't necessarily mean a picture. I mean, an image can be a piece of music. For example, Bill joined us on Friday evening. We saw American in Paris performed by the Annapolis Symphony. And so none of you were thinking about American in Paris before I mentioned it. None of you were either. But now that I have mentioned it, everybody has an image of what that piece of music is about in their head. They might see Gene Kelly dancing in the movie of the American in Paris or whatever it is, but we all have an image that involves the music, and it comes forth when it's mentioned. It's called up, this is a whole different area of psychology, which is called neuro-linguistic programming. But it's the way our mind works. So our mind works in the form of images, and it can't be predicted. I mean,
Well, it would be like predicting if you gave a story or a theme to, say, a movie director. You had 10 movie directors. They're all gonna do movies about the same theme or archetype, but they're gonna present it with different imagery. Whereas this might use an old couple, young couple, renegade, Bonnie and Clyde. It could be any. So you'd have different images. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
but you would be covering your relationship to those archetypes. That's why it would take on a different coloring. So
Well, you remember Albert, right?
Yeah. Quite well. He got kidnapped by the Nazis, right?
Okay, for those of you who weren't there, 2 years ago I was working up to have my knee replaced, and and so I read from the Book of Symbols. I read all the associations that the Jungian analysts could possibly come up with about the word knee. Okay, all right, because it was about knee, right? And I had this dream about my knee, and but none of the references in that book had anything to do with my dream about the knee, right? Because my
Contextual to your own experience.
exactly, that's the
Not a
point.
book. Yeah.
That's the point. And so my knee was personified in my dream, right? And it had a name. Its name was Albert. And Albert was being kidnapped by the Nazis because I was going to lose my knee, right? And so I was
He
imagining,
disappeared, right?
huh?
Did he disappear?
He disappeared. Yeah, he was kidnapped by the Nazis, and so that was my original knee being removed and being replaced by an artificial knee. And it turned out to be a great experience, by the way, and I highly recommend it to anybody who has knee problems. But nonetheless, I did have this very interesting experience 2 summers ago about the knee. And so that's why symbols, a book of symbols doesn't do anything for you. You have to,
So, but getting back to my point, because it's still a little murky to me, Neumann was saying that there may be a need to experience the shadow to get to become individuated. So, how does it? I guess how does the unconscious and the imagery and so forth relate to volition? So he's basically saying, well, okay, what Bill is saying is you still have an immature psyche. Does that mean you have to experience the shadow? You have to. You have to dive
You have to
in.
integrate the shadow. That's the first step.
You said integrate, but do you have to?
That's
have to
experience.
It's
You have to
experiencing it.
experience it.
You experience it,
Like, what if
but
it's
in
like
the
robbing a
end, when
bank
you're
or something?
experiencing it, it becomes integral to your volition. So it becomes a part of how you volitate, how you think.
How you think and how you act.
Yeah.
So you know what to hold back.
everybody's been a naughty little boy or
Yeah.
girl at one point, one way or another. And
They're not separate. That's the main thing.
everyone's been punished by
What's
it
not
one way or
separate?
another. If you have a
Volition and the experience of the shadow. See, if you don't experience the shadow, if it's not integrated, you're gonna be divided, and then your thinking is not gonna fit who you are. You can't possibly individuate. You'll become a puppet of somebody else's thinking or their dogmas. You'll only be able to think in the channels that you hold in your head that have nothing to do with who you are because you've not integrated or experienced the shadow. The shadow will shape the way it'll bring this thinking in line with who you are, and there will be, you won't be one or the other completely because your shadow's nothing until it gets integrated because it doesn't have any guidance, and all of your guidance means nothing to you because it isn't experienced. So you gotta blend the two.
And then ideally, things won't turn out too badly, as John says, because we all have both streams coming up all the time, and you have to make the right choice. You have to make the right choice in your own mind about what's right. So, okay, so I brought this book along, C.G. Jung, Psychological Reflections, a new anthology of his writings, 1905 to 1961, edited by Yolanda Jacobi and R.C. Hall. Okay, so that's the book, and it's published by Princeton University Press. And what this has is about 1,000 quotes from Jung. And I thought, for the purposes of our live discussion group, I would read you a few quotes and then get commentary on it. They're short. So the first one is, one looks back with appreciation to the brilliant teachers, but with gratitude to those who touched our human feelings. The curriculum is so much necessary raw material, but warmth is the vital element for the growing plant and for the soul of a child. And that's from The Gifted Child, collected work number 17, paragraph 249. Okay. You ready to comment, John?
He's working on his shadow.
Okay, let me read it once more. One looks back with appreciation to the brilliant teachers, but with gratitude to those who touched our human feelings. The curriculum is so much necessary raw material, but warmth is the vital element for the growing plant and for the soul of the child. So,
That just seems so romantic to me, and I don't connect to it because my life was not like that. But I'm also autistic.
you don't connect to.
Well, I
To-
didn't have any brilliant teachers that I can bring to mind. And
Did you have
touches-
any empathetic teachers that you cared about? Is there-
Okay, well, I could go with that. It's just the wording is so extreme to me that it almost pushes
Right.
me away.
Well, let's take Jordan Peterson, Nancy, which is he resonated with you in some way. Did he resonate with you because of the facts that he was presenting, or did he resonate with you because of the way that what he was presenting related to you emotionally?
Exactly. That was it. So I think he resonated with me because of his passion in his teaching and how it grabs him to an emotional level in some higher level of discourse to his students in the classroom, where he would go like, don't you just get it? I don't understand why you don't get this. It's amazing. So yes, he resonates in this way because he captures a feeling way inside you. And I said that to him, you get to me. When I'm listening to you and I watched you and I heard you, you get to me. Okay? As emotional as you got, I got. It was cool. It was very cool.
You've watched a little Jordan Peterson.
Oh, he definitely has passion.
Right.
I don't think he's reconciled that passion within himself, though, and that's why it has so much energy.
That's an issue, I think, too, for me. Okay, because, let me make a couple of comments about his two books, both of which I've read on Audible. I didn't read Maps of Meaning first. I read The 12 Rules of Life first. And my reaction to the 12 Rules of Life was it was a lot of rules. It's like well, wasn't enough rules.
I don't know anything about him. So.
Yeah, once you watch Kitty Flanagan and her 488 Rules of Life, then Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules of Life gets sort of parodied, I would say. But the issue is that when you're a teacher, when you're a university professor, you have people in the first half of life who are trying to learn where the handles are. in life. And so you have to teach them rules. You have to teach them, okay, this is the way science came along. Or, if they're in pre-med, you have to say, okay, well, this is how this came up, and this is how we got into anatomy, and this is what you learn in anatomy, and these are all the facts of life, right? And so it's like when your parents teach you the facts of life, factually. Then, okay, you got the facts, but you have no idea what that really means, right? And so my only criticism of Jordan Peterson is that he tends to focus on the logos, and the logos has no life in it. So I have taped on my computer a quote from Leonardo da Vinci, which is in Walter Isaacson's biography of da Vinci, which is, he who has access to the fountain doesn't go to the water jar. Okay, so the logos, the rules, are the water jar, but what you put in to the rules is life, and is what actually is the essence of life, right? And so, I like Jordan Peterson a lot. I've learned a lot of psychology from him because I never studied psychology except for Jung.
You know, I'm not a thinker so much as I am a feeler, especially when I was young. So when you said empathetic. I had empathetic teachers, and those are the ones I remember. And what they did was they didn't teach me any facts, or they didn't teach me anything really. They allowed me to learn what I was interested in, and they not only supported me and encouraged me. They basically said, "You're okay."
Yeah, and that's very important. It's a point that Edinger makes about raising children, which is that it's essential for a child to believe that they're good, that they're a good person, and because if they don't believe that, then their psyche is crushed before they can cope. And this has to do with building up the ego. If the child isn't brought up to believe that they're good and have enough experiences so that they internalize that, then if something hard happens to them, they're crushed psychologically. You agree with that?
I agree with that, and they can't recover sometimes.
Yeah, you can't. Were you a psychotherapist?
No, I was not.
Okay.
So, no, but you can see how some parenting can
parenting.
continually knock a child down over and over and over, and so
Right. And so parents, especially fathers who are very tough on their kids, can really crush their. Is that taking pictures? Or
No. It just means it's silent. That means you got a text.
It means what?
You got a text. That's all.
Oh, it means you got.
Yeah,
You're
so it's
popular.
all-
Wow.
It's all silent.
I'm impressed.
Okay. Shut it off.
All
Yeah.
right.
Okay, let me read another one here. Okay, psychoanalysis cannot be considered. Let's turn this way. Once more. Psychoanalysis cannot be considered a method of education if by education we mean the topiary art of clipping a tree into a beautiful artificial shape. But those who have a higher conception of education prize most the method of cultivating a tree so that it fulfills to perfection its own natural conditions of growth. And that comes from Freud and Psychoanalysis, collected work number 4, paragraph 442. So I'll read it one more time. And I think
Freud
this,
saying this?
huh?
Freud saying this?
No, it's Jung saying it, but it's from this essay called Freud and Psychoanalysis.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not sure quite what the Freudian context is, although Freud tended to be very materialistic and wanted rules, so he may have been more into the topiary art, which Jung wasn't going for. So I'll read it one more time. Psychoanalysis cannot be considered a method of education if, by education, we mean the topiary art of clipping a tree into a beautiful artificial shape. But those who have a higher conception of education will prize most the method of cultivating a tree so that it fulfills to perfection its own natural conditions of growth. So I used to raise bonsai trees, raise and sell them. And of course, bonsai trees are actual trees, so they're actual. So you actually get an oak tree or a an evergreen tree or whatever it is. It can also be a cherry tree, whatever. It can be any kind of tree, but it's clipped so that it stays small. Okay, but if you took a bonsai tree and took it outside and just planted it, it would grow like a normal tree again. Okay, and it would become an oak tree. If it's an oak bonsai, it would become an actual oak. And so I think the point he's saying is that, psychoanalysis can't be trying to make you adapt to this sort of thing in society. It has to be something where it gives you the freedom to be you.
Well, he's probably referring to behaviorism, because behaviorism is the reward and.
What's the word you
But,
use?
well, I can't think of the
You said reward or what?
rewards. You do the correct, but you ring the bell, then you get your reward. You get your pellet of food. Yeah, Skinner, the behaviors, the black box people. There is no internal. Everything's a black block. The black box. There's no internal things going on. Everything is
Stimulus response.
there you go. Thanks. See, I don't think in those terms. I've lost the vocabulary.
How do you think that distortion arose? I mean, that's really cold and
Well, I don't know, but I suspect it's historical, where everybody was, and they still do it. They're trying to always reduce something to a scientific method, and of course the dominant discourse in scientific method now is physics, which it has been a lot off and on, but it's usually physics, and which is kind of funny, because if you ask a physics about the universe and what reality is, he always talks about physics. He doesn't realize that it's just one of the stories you tell, just like any other story. But they take their story to be real, just like most of us do. We have a story about what's going on, and that we think is real, and forget that it's really just sort of a raft at sea. It's just something we made up, and it floats for a while, and then it goes away. You create another raft, or you join a larger, armada or something.
So relevant to that is an essay of this
I have a
book,
follow-up
Jung's
question
Red
for you
Book for
about
Our Time, Searching for Soul Under Postmodern Conditions. And the other day, I read an essay in that by Susan Rowland, which you can find. It's still a behind-the-scenes version, so I have not yet edited my reading, but the reading is on the channel. And she talks about how a man named Nicolescu is this name, and he wrote a book called Modernity and Cosmodernity. Does that word mean anything to you, cosmodernity?
No.
Okay, but anyway, he's a quantum physicist, and so look up Susan Rowland in there. Anyway, my reading is online, and he talks about how we have to connect up various disciplines, and we need transdisciplinarity. In other words, right now in universities, typically, there's the psych department and the religion department and the sociology department, and they all stay within their own towers, their own silos, stovepipes, but nothing gets answered by
Those pages are missing.
what? Yes, I have the original essay, Bill. I can send you the original essay.
I've got the book, and I just don't remember the article right yet.
Yeah, but I'm actually not sure that it's in there. But in any case, I have the actual essay. And Nancy, one thing that you may not know is that we have a Dropbox for the group. Everyone is invited to join the Dropbox. You can send me an email to skip.conover@gmail.com, and I will add you to the Dropbox. And in there are many treasures. And one of the treasures is the collected works of C.G. Jung in electronic format. Okay. But also there are several of these books by Edinger are in there, and Ulanoff, and this essay by Susan Rowland is in there because I didn't get the full essay in my book.
Oh, they came that way.
It came that way.
Let me see if I have the essay.
But I realized it very early, and so they kindly sent me another book. But that's the original one I got, and it was missing several pages, and they happened to be pages in Susan Rowland's essay. But Dr. Rowland was kind enough to send me her essay so that I could read it. So, anyway. So the topiary art, the idea of education being not, you have to be this way. It's saying, these are the rules, but, try some other things. Try a little shadow. No, I mean,
It's also saying you can't be who you want to be or should be. It's who I think you should be by just clipping you. That's what it's saying on this tree situation
and
of
Dr. Jung is saying
topiaries.
individuation is being who you were meant to be, not who society meant for you to be.
Right.
What happens is we take it out of the crate, then we stick a label on it.
Okay.
Because then you're a puppet.
But then you're a puppet. Then you're living somebody else's life, and so.
And then they bring it back in
Yeah.
at the end of the show.
But Jung also said that there was the individuation, and there was also the community. So he was admitting that there was a balance there. It was in the Red Book.
Because I make sure that they.
Yeah, you have to have balance, and you have to have the experience of the dark side in order to recognize it when it comes.
Well, does that mean that then the person who's experienced a shadow becomes a Puritan and clamps down on everybody else on his own transgressions?
Certainly can have an impact.
And that can be that can be its own shadow.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what created the Puritans. Maybe they had Mephistopheles images. Really.
He was a busy guy,
Be
Mephistopheles.
consumed by the shadow, says Sean. Who you are. I couldn't see all of that, Thomas. And by the way, Thomas, I have on my shopping cart on Amazon to buy your new book. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. Thomas has written a new book. Thomas Dennis is his new book, which I hope you'll put the name of the new book into the chat, Thomas, so everybody can see it. It's something like You have to take a snake on a stick seriously or something like that. But Tom, oh, here we go. Never snicker at a snake on a stick, which is what I'm doing. Okay, I apologize for my snickers. Okay, so I urge everyone to take a look at Thomas's new book. Great name, I must say. Okay, here's another one. Aestheticism. Aestheticism is not fitted to solve the exceedingly serious and difficult task of educating man, for it always presupposes the very thing it should create, the capacity to love beauty. It actually hinders a deeper investigation of the problem because it always averts its face from anything evil, ugly, and difficult, and aims at pleasure, even though it be an edifying kind. Therefore, lacks all moral force because basically it is still only a refined hedonism. Would you like to comment on that, Bill? I'll read it again if you like.
You might have to read it again because I thought you said asceticism.
I did say that. Aestheticism.
No. As in having yourself of any joy and
Yeah.
okay, and then you switch to aestheticism.
Well, it's aesthetics, right?
ASCE.
AESTHETIC.
ASCET.
Oh no, not that aestheticism. No, this is aestheticism, the enjoyment of beauty. Okay, all right. So aestheticism is not fitted to solve the exceedingly serious and difficult task of educating man, for it always presupposes the very thing it should create, the capacity to love beauty. It actually hinders a deeper investigation of the problem because it always averts its face from anything evil, ugly, and difficult, and aims at pleasure, even though it be of an edifying kind. Aestheticism, therefore, lacks all moral force because au fond, which means basically, because basically it is still only a refined hedonism.
Well, aestheticism is a ism, and so you're talking about like a school of thought or a manner of behavior. Aesthetics itself is not aestheticism. So you can have an aesthetic appreciation for something without having to go overboard and
Make a religion out of it.
yeah, and make rules where you're not gonna look at evil or funny or ugly. Well, hell, you're not gonna look at ugly art. I mean, you'd wipe out the whole 20th century. You know.
That's true. Good point.
Right.
So.
Who is the famous artist who was at the time of Georges Sand and Chopin, who did the very detailed, ugly paintings of an accident where a horse is torn apart in an accident or something like
I don't know.
that.
I was an aestheticist.
You were
So-
you were
I avoided those.
Yeah, I always wanted to turn my eyes away, but
No, I know who you're talking about.
French
I don't know
artist?
the name.
yeah,
I don't know the name.
Was it Rimbaud or Rimbaud?
No.
Or something like that?
it starts with a C. I don't recall. Anyway, okay.
Oh.
I don't get that quote. I'm having trouble with that whole.
Okay. Let me-
First of all, aestheticism is like a school of art criticism or something. It's a way of thinking and looking at art, and so they shun anything that's ugly, and it's kind of prissy. I almost see them holding their white gloves and talking, that's
I
just
see.
me.
Okay.
That's my image of it, but which isn't that accurate.
Okay. So here's one more. Children have an almost uncanny instinct for the teacher's personal shortcomings. They know the false from the true far better than one likes to admit. Therefore, the teacher should watch his own psychic condition so that he can spot the source of the trouble when anything goes wrong with the children entrusted to his care. He himself may easily be the unconscious cause of evil. Naturally, we must not be too naive in this matter. There are people, doctors as well as teachers, who secretly believe that a person in authority, because sooner or later he will have to adapt to real life, which will treat him no better. Such people are convinced at heart that the only thing that matters is material success, and the only real and effective moral restraint is the policeman behind the penal code. There, where unconditional adaptation to the powers of this world is accepted as the supreme principle of belief. It would, of course, be vain to expect psychological insight from a person in authority as a moral obligation, but anyone who professes a democratic view of the world cannot approve of such an authoritarian attitude, believing as he does in a fair distribution of burdens and advantages. It is not true that the educator is always the one who educates, and the child always the one to be educated. The educator, too, is a fallible human being, and the child he educates will reflect his failings. Therefore, it is wise to be as clear-sighted as possible about one's subjective views, and particularly about one's faults. As a man is, so will be his ultimate truth, and so also his strongest effect on others.
That's a long quote.
Yeah.
Well, I would say, first off, it's sort of like the bonsai tree telling the oak how to grow.
Yeah. Right.
But also, it makes it sound like the child is always the innocent one and the teacher's the potentially evil one. And I've seen, as a teacher, I've seen children that are evil ones.
All children are wild animals. There's no doubt about that.
Some of them are sitting there trying to trap you and make you go off the rails. So, and I remember in those instances, I wasn't working with young children, I was working with college students, but I would just keep bringing everything back to the material, and not make it a personal thing.
Right.
You mean they were making it a personal thing?
Yeah, my feeling was I was like their parent. You know, they were using me as a surrogate parent, and they were trying to get back at me. I'm just here, leave me alone. Here's the material.
Here's the
Let's
material.
focus on that.
Smart.
Okay.
Probably survival.
Survival.
Well, I think that it's fair enough. The way this comes up for me is that I think we're back on the line. So it's a group of about 40,000 people, and 8 of them objected to sexual and physical abuse, where the guru was throwing his shoe across the room at people and so on. And it's kind of like this, what's discussed here, which is the person in power can get away with whatever. And a lot of these other teachers from Tibetan Buddhism are saying, well, if you can't get along with the teacher, then it's you that's wrong, right? And
Says the teacher.
Deb says, well, the Buddha lived 2,500, and we have different attitudes in the civilized West now, and so in the West, I mean, you can't assault people and sexually abuse people here anymore. And so ultimately, number of 5 years, and she resigned from it because they wouldn't get their act in line, and they, a lot of the older senior teachers, these Tibetan masters, said, well, if that's the way the teacher wants to teach you, that's his prerogative. And I was, no, that may have passed up in the caves in Tibet, but it doesn't pass in Annapolis, Maryland, or in France or any place else where this was happening. And
In the caves of Tibet, it seems like someone might react to being treated like that and not survive that long anyway.
yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, you can imagine that there are many stories. There are many stories in the Naked City.
Yeah, on the mountain pass, you could slip and
Yeah,
fall off.
I mean, it's all about people of power taking advantage of people without power.
Yeah, it's true. And at the same time, they're trying to empower everyone. It's kind of ironic, isn't it?
Truly. Okay.
Pretending to empower.
How are we doing on time? Okay, we're still here. What book would you recommend? Oh, sorry, Sean, I could not see that. I'll try to look at
Yeah,
the
they're not.
chat
They're
when I get home.
they're not.
If don't see what has been chatted, I wish you would send me an email. The rate email is skip.conover@gmail.com. Okay, this relates to your issue, John, between good and evil. And well, no, you raised this question about
get my
shadow
pad out.
and how to deal with it, right?
John's issue.